Welcome back inside the parlor. Nice to have you here talking football. I'm not going to mention the World Cup. Things are still a little bit raw, even though it feels like an eternity still until that Boxing Day Liverpool tilt. Still time to get merch then. I love this. This is my favorite of all my new Castor training gear. But what about this beauty? I hadn't seen this before. The one thing you could say about this apparel company is that there is no shortage of selection, varieties, or colors. I love the camo detail here. I've put a link in the description below when you use that link to make your purchases. And if you live in the UK, there's still time to get your merchandise before Christmas. You also help support the show. Now, a good run out for Aston Villa in the desert of Abu Dhabi near Dubai, where, well, they beat Chelsea and they drew Brighton. So productive. And more importantly, there's a playing style and personality emerging. 27 passes prior to John McGinn's game-winning goal. But I don't want to talk about Dubai or that desert. I want to talk about Las Vegas, Nevada, where rumor has it that Aston Villa is looking to acquire a Major League Soccer franchise to put in the desert of Nevada. There's a lot to unpack over this particular philosophy of global branding and footballing development and cooperation networks. And when you're in Vegas, you're sure to get a free cocktail while you're gambling. Look what I found for $10 off. Fettercairn, never heard of this single malt Highland whiskey. I gotta tell you, it's pretty nice and the perfect accoutrement to talk Villa in Vegas. Before we get into Las Vegas MLS talk, I am still buzzing over Emiliano Martinez and his role in helping Argentina get to the World Cup semifinals. We are watching a player become an iconic figure in his country. And I'm also watching the Selección series, the Argentina all or nothing type documentary that follows them from the Copa America win, which Emmy was also a big part of, right up until the selection for the World Cup squad. And this football mad country values that national team jersey like no other, I don't think. You know, since 1978, every single kid in that country wants to wear that jersey. Hernan Crespo could barely speak. He was so emotional about the weight and the pride of wearing that jersey. It's a great series, offers a lot of insights into Dibu as well. And by the way, that sky camera views from the shooter's perspective, I mean, my legs were rubbery watching this, and I didn't play 120 minutes and was then asked to take a penalty. And look at how small the goal looks, and look at how big Emiliano Martinez looks. And when you make the first two saves of a penalty shootout, you have crushed the opponent mentally. Now, there's been some speculation linking Aston Villa with Morocco's number one goalkeeper, Yassine Bono, who's actually born in Canada. And his club currently is one of Unai Emery's former employers in Sevilla. And like many clubs in Spain and Europe, they are trying to improve their financial situation. So to maybe cash in on a 31-year-old now whose contract expires in 2025, so it's a longer-term deal, might be financially relevant for both Aston Villa and Sevilla. But also, I think we really need to look seriously at whether Emiliano Martinez is being pushed enough at Aston Villa competition-wise, because right now he's inked in as the starter, and that's not going to change unless there is a viable alternative. And you also have to think about injuries and suspensions, and I don't think this is going to be an unreasonable ticket if, in fact, the rumors are true. And what if Emiliano Martinez, thanks in part to his World Cup exploits, is offered a bumper opportunity to play Champions League football, in the near term? I mean, these are all things you have to consider. I've been really impressed with Bono, and quite frankly, I think there's a little bit of Emmy in him. If you saw the penalty shootout, against Spain, he was heroic. So this is a win-win, I think, for everybody involved, if true. I'm going to focus our next show specifically on the transfer rumors, not the names like at the micro level, but at a more macro level, and what these rumors are telling us about Aston Villa Football Club right now. And it's very, very encouraging to me because we've seen many examples, despite all the rumors and speculation at this time of year and other times of years, when the smoke starts swirling, there is often a fire nearby. And it is absolutely clear to me now that our owners had lost faith in the footballing department sometime probably right after Bournemouth and were not willing to throw money at it any further. Now, different story, and that'll be our next show. Now, just for context, I spent 10 years in Major League Soccer as a radio and television commentator, so it was a really fun job where I got to be in every major city in North America at least 3 times each. And I got to know a lot of people. I got to look behind the scenes with a VIP front row seat as to how the sausages were made, as they like to say, in Major League Soccer. And I developed a great network of friends and colleagues. So information was really easy to share and to gather. And I'm insatiably curious. So I asked a lot of questions of football people, non-football people, and I learned a lot, frankly, being in that position and sort of having front row access. And the one thing that I will say without any question at all is that Major League Soccer is a spectacular business enterprise and a young business enterprise, relatively speaking, thanks to its structure. In 2001, Major League Soccer made a very bold move, which some pundits in North America said would spell the end of the league when they folded their Florida franchises, the Tampa Bay Mutiny and Miami Fusion. But they also established a soccer marketing rights company called Soccer United Marketing. And every MLS owner then became a limited partner of this agency that owned the marketing rights to, among other things, the U.S. men's and women's national teams, which were a big part of it. And now they're splitting after all this time. In a couple of weeks, as a matter of fact, that deal ends. But also the Mexican men's national team when playing on U.S. soil, the CONCACAF Gold Cups, all of those preseason friendly tournaments involving big European clubs as they prepare for their seasons. Any of those events were owned by some, as are future events. If you don't have an event, well, make one up, like the Copa Centenario a few summers ago. And actually, there's another Copa event being planned on U.S. soil involving teams from outside of South America. Essentially, when you become an owner in Major League Soccer, your franchise fee buys into all of those marketing assets. And the expansion fees have been growing and getting bigger and bigger. And so have the commercial deals. For example, the local club here in 2010 paid $35 million to join MLS, and 12 years later, it's worth $350 million. And here's the amazing thing as you look at all the different assets that SUM has under its umbrella, but when you put all that together, it's including this new Apple deal, which is worth $2 billion over 10 years. I mean, there's a couple of billion at least in assets here. And that means that every single owner that has become a limited partner and bought into Soccer United Marketing gets an annual dividend. And my understanding is that annual dividend is anywhere from about $12 to $15 million per year. So even if you don't have a single supporter go through your turnstiles for an entire season, you know at the end of that season, there is still this annual dividend. And there's cost certainty thanks to your salary cap of the playing roster and no threat of relegation. And this is why MLS franchises are going for a cool $350 million US right now. That's about 287 million pounds. But when you factor in your own stadium, which isn't necessarily a requirement of the league, but that's another 250 million US minimum. If you put those two costs together, then an MLS franchise right now that has never kicked a football is worth more than, say, what Newcastle was bought for by the Saudis, a grand old football club that has a stadium. Isn't that crazy? But that is the business of Major League Soccer and the cost certainty, which includes no relegation. Just as a side note, I find this infinitely fascinating. But right now, the Premier League features 14 clubs with American ownership interests, including Aston Villa. And why that's significant is that 14 is the number and the threshold for the 2/3 majority vote within the league. And why that should concern us is that there is no question the whole Super League concept was rooted in American interests. Now, John Henry is apparently exploring the Fenway Sports Group dumping of Liverpool to Middle Eastern interests, so that number could change imminently and for now. But Americans are used to their leagues being the best of their kind in the world without that pesky relegation issue. Think about it. The NFL, biggest league in the world next to the Premier League, Major League Baseball, the National Basketball Association, go down the list. These are all free market type leagues with salary caps and cost certainty and no relegation. MLS has no relegation nor no plans for relegation. The salary cap numbers are low, relatively speaking. In some cases, mid to lower championship level valuations low. So in terms of cost certainty, this is an attractive venture and why so many potential owners are lined up hoping to have a franchise all over North America, not to mention this looming 2026 CONCACAF hosted World Cup bid, which a lot of people think is going to be like this turbo boost button for soccer in North America. I'm not so sure. Now, the consequence of all this great business is, and there has to be a compromise somewhere, it's the standard of football. And there's been an age-old debate at how MLS clubs would fare in foreign leagues. Now, in my opinion, the champion of Major League Soccer, the MLS Cup winner, would have a very difficult time surviving relegation over 38 games in the Premier League, simply because there are only so many salary mechanisms to improve your roster. And the valuations of rosters are just, they're obscenely wide from MLS to the Premier League. But I also think the poorer clubs in MLS would have a tough time getting promoted out of League One to the championship. And one of the reasons for that, I'll go bring it right back around again, is the lack of consequence for finishing near the bottom. From a football developmental standpoint, there are examples of players who have gone straight from Major League Soccer to the Premier League. I think Miguel Almiron is the best example. Atlanta to Newcastle. It took a while, but he is really emerging right now. Brandon Aronson has been very good for Leeds. Jack Harrison was going from, I think, New York to the championship side before they got promoted. Tyler Adams took a longer route around through the Red Bull organization to get to Leeds. If you want to go farther back, DeAndre Yedlin went from the Sounders to Newcastle. And if you want to go really far back, Clint Dempsey and Brian McBride were excellent servants of Fulham Football Club, and they had come from Major League Soccer. But the examples are still very rare. And one of the objectives or the benefits that I keep hearing is that, oh, great, we're going to have a Las Vegas, Nevada MLS franchise. We're going to send those players straight from there to the Premier League. I think that's going to become more rare over time as the Premier League keeps getting bigger and keeps getting more money thrown at it through television revenue, whereas MLS is still staying relatively stable because of the priority of cost certainty to the owners. Now, one issue that would absolutely concern me, and it's a bit of a fantasy in my opinion, to think that Las Vegas, Nevada and Major League Soccer would be the perfect place for our high potential 17 to 20-year-old-ish players learn how to become professionals. Because I've seen it with my own two eyes over and over again. High potential, talent, coming into this league with big ambitions and big ideas, settling and then losing their edge and just fading away. And that's not Major League Soccer's fault, by the way. That's a lifestyle issue that sometimes I think occurs in the comfort of North America. I've given you an example of lots of players who have gone from this league, used it as a stepping stone, and then flourished elsewhere. But that's a handful of players. I've seen just as many come here and the opposite occurring. Now, let me ask you this. If you were the parent of a high potential 17 to 20-year-old player, would you want them to come to Sin City, the city that never sleeps, to learn how to become a professional? Not me. We're only now just finding out that a Premier League regular in Jacob Ramsey had this habit of staying up late and playing video games and eating candy till all hours, among other things, and he's now going through some off-field lifestyle adjustments. Let's see how that works out for him. But that was a Premier League regular. I saw that all the time here in North America. Players from football-mad countries, young players from Honduras or other Central American or Caribbean countries, Africa, the Gambia, Ghana, lots of players from there, or Uruguay and other South American countries coming here, hopefully to use this as a stepping stone to Europe. And they came and they became comfortable in North America because there's very little scrutiny from fans or the media. The media is dying here football-wise in North America. And also, you have to have good people around, good mentors, and oftentimes that was not the case in MLS. A perfect example locally is Nigel Reo-Coker came to this community to play for the local MLS club. I was well chuffed initially because of his Aston Villa connections, and he's a fun and engaging character, but not a suitable mentor to high potential young players. In fact, one night, he took out a very high potential, high draft pick from the U.S. college system out on the lash in downtown Vancouver. And wouldn't you know it, he got into an altercation, which would have been front page news in England, but not here. In fact, the local club managed to convince the media that Nigel had tripped over a bike rack. And that's why he had a black eye. I kid you not. Not long after, that high potential, high draft pick quit soccer altogether. Now, there's another objective to this plan, which I find somewhat debatable, especially given the outlay. I mean, I mentioned it, $350 million just to buy the franchise, and then at least another $250 million to build a stadium. You're into it for $600 million before you've even kicked a football. And that's this idea that by being in Las Vegas, Nevada, United States, in Major League Soccer is somehow going to increase Aston Villa's global footprint or profile, or even their profile in the United States, which for Villa is an emerging market. And the reason I say that is because MLS features two behemoth groups in the City Group and the Red Bulls Group, both operating in New York. The Red Bulls have struggled for relevance from day one when they rebranded from the Metro Stars, when Red Bull took over that club. Even with Thierry Henry, they had a tough time selling out Red Bull Arena. And if you mention the Red Bull Group to some football people around the world, they will look at you with disdain, especially in Germany, where they look at the Red Bull franchise as like a chain of fast food restaurants like McDonald's. As for the City Group, they've struggled of late to keep the early momentum going, which is a common thing. So there's been a recession of attendance at Yankee Stadium, which is understandable because that's not a footballing venue and it's not their own venue, but they have released plans for their development in Queens, New York, which looks spectacular and should be up and running in about 4 years' time. So we'll see. But I've always struggled with this idea that you're asking fans in one country to support a branch of, or a satellite feeder club, or even a farm club of another bigger club that exists and operates in a foreign country. That just seems weird to me. Like, for example, if you're a United fan living in New York, why on earth would you support New York City FC knowing that they have affiliations with Manchester City? That just is weird. And there aren't enough Manchester City fans living in New York to fill a stadium each and every week. So we go to Las Vegas and let's take the permanent residents of that community and ask the 100,000 hardest core football fans who their favorite club is. And I will guarantee you 3 out of 4 of them, 75% of them will say either Chivas or America of Liga MX in Mexico. You'd have to go 30 places down or more before you got to Aston Villa. There is not an Aston Villa enclave living in Las Vegas, and they're not all going to fly from Birmingham every week to fill that stadium. This is the issue that I simply don't understand in terms of global branding. In fact, let's put the shoe on the other foot. What if this Las Vegas franchise was so successful, like bumper successful, that the owner said, well, why don't we rebrand the parent club to reflect this? Let's call them the Aces or the Villains FC. How would you feel about that? As ridiculous as that might sound. If it's me or if I'm Wes or Nassif, my objective for this franchise would be to ensure that it is hugely successful, can stand on its own 2 feet by itself, and serve the community of Las Vegas, Nevada, and maybe even become one of the best and most high-profile teams in North America, kind of like LAFC. Great brand, beautiful stadium, excellent footballing people and philosophies, and on-field success. Because I feel like, Vegas is such a uniquely positioned and globally recognized city. It would be almost a waste to not brand that club there in a way that speaks to the people who live there year-round and are being asked to support it. The Las Vegas Golden Knights of the NHL are a great example. Great brand, fine arena in a good location, and success on the ice. They have all the locals coming to watch them play, but then they are augmented by all these people who come to Vegas as an excuse to watch the away team play, but then also go and take in all the sights, sounds, and experiences that the city has to offer. That's, for me, the way this club should be approached. I'll give you another great example of why global branding hasn't worked in Major League Soccer, and that's Chivas USA. Most people don't realize that there are more Americans watching Liga MX than there are Americans watching Major League Soccer, and that's because of immigration from Mexico to the United States. Chivas operated in Los Angeles as a branch of Chivas de Guadalajara, and there are tons of Chivas fans in the Los Angeles and California area, and they did not support this team. It was depressing going there to empty stadiums in front of friends and family. That side was folded, and LAFC rose from the ashes, and they made that club the heart of LA. They branded it superbly. They had local high-profile Hollywood owners like Will Ferrell. And it is now the model franchise of the league and the current league champions that had 40,000 people out to their victory parade. And I believe that the merchandise is among the higher sellers of American clubs. So here's the model. Brand it to suit the locals in Las Vegas and the unique vibe of that community. And then footballing-wise, find the highest potential players in South America, move them on and through with good football development people. And if you're going to bring in veterans, make sure they are just over their prime and can still dominate in Major League Soccer, but set the tone for developmental success and good mentorship. That's how all the good teams have functioned in MLS. I believe in this concept of global cooperation footballing networks because FIFA is going to start cracking down on the biggest clubs, hoarding the best young talent and then just loaning them out all over the place. And the workaround to that is by owning or partially owning clubs in foreign leagues, which will then help those clubs and foreign leagues become better. For an example, you can own an Austrian Bundesliga club, top tier, established club, for under €1 million. I had no idea of that, but that's partially because of the relegation risk. And similar deals can be had in Poland and Portugal, where Aston Villa is exploring this kind of a cooperation type deal, or Eastern European leagues, all of which would probably offer more challenging footballing environments for our players if that's the route we want to go. And they're not an 8-hour plane ride away from the parent club. Listen, North America is a wonderful place to be. Major League Soccer is a growing business enterprise. Las Vegas, Nevada is a legendary city. It would be great to have a club there, but it needs to be there for the right reasons. And I'm still unconvinced as to what the true benefit is going to be for Aston Villa Football Club in Birmingham, England. My opinions on this matter were challenged on Twitter. I was told to think bigger. You know how we become bigger? Because in my mind, Aston Villa is already a big global club, which I have experienced firsthand based on the viewership to this show. Do you know how you become bigger? You bring in bigger, higher profile or higher potential players. You win more games and you get back to the European stage. That is absolutely night and day from starting up a Major League Soccer franchise in North America. And I think MLS has more to gain from the Aston Villa relationship than the other way around. I know you may not share these opinions and you will articulate yourself beautifully in the comments below, which I always appreciate and always read. I very rarely have time to reply. I'm very, very sorry. But one day I want this show to be live and interactive, and producer Rob and I are working towards that for maybe even as early as the holidays or early in the new year. Until next time, be well, be festive, and as always, up the mighty Villa.